Begin today the Gemara towards the bottom of Daf Yutes Amud Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom, where it says Tanu Rabbanan. Continuing the halachas regarding a shtar, we have Eidim that are coming and testifying about the authenticity of this shtar. But then there's questions about whether the shtar is actually kosher or not. That's the sugya we're learning here, the sugya of shtaris. So here there's a brayse that is another detail about this halacha. Tanu Rabbanan Shnayim Chasumim al shtar. You have two people that signed the shtar. Umeisu, but those witnesses passed away. But now, Bo Shnaim and Ashok, another two Eidim from the street come, Va'amru, and they say, Yadainu, that we know, Shiksav Yadamhu, that this is their signatures. So they're coming to verify their signatures. Aval, Anusim Hayu, but what they signed is a false document, because Anusim Hayu, they signed it, they were being forced to sign this, or Ktanim Hayu, or it was that they were under Bar Mitzvah when they signed it, or Psuli Eidus, or they were Pastor when they signed it.
How would they know?
So this is their Eidim. They're telling us that this they wore. They're Eidim and they're testifying that this is what happened. So therefore they're saying, yeah, of course, that's what they're saying. We recognize their signatures, but we also know what happened, that when they signed it, the shtar is false. So this is really, the same exact case we had in the Mishnah. But in the Mishnah, it was saying that the Eidim themselves that signed it are saying this. Here, the Eidim that signed it are not alive anymore. But now it's being verified. But they're saying, but they were puzzled when they signed it. They're believed to say this. Again, this goes back to the rule we had in the Mishnah, since they're the ones that are verifying this, so they're also believed to say under what conditions it happened. However, if this shtar was already independently verified, there's other Eidim that already testified that this is their signatures. It was independently verified in a different way. That you had their signatures that came in a different place that you can compare to. And which shtar from where? Where could you compare to? Mishtar Shakara Olav Ira. There was another document which was challenged. And there was a discussion whether this is authentic signatures or not. And V'huchzak bebezdin. And the Bezdin verified their signatures on another shtar. And now you compare the signatures of this shtar to that shtar and you see that it's authentic. So it was already independently verified. So then, so these Eidim that want to come and say that, yeah, we recognize these signatures, but the shtar is still false because they were puzzle or whatever, it's a puzzle shtar, they can't say this. Why? Because it's already independently verified. It's not based on them. Okay, this is the Braisa. 1 second. So now the Gemara asks on this last point here, what does this mean? Does the Braisa mean to say that we could now use this shtar and collect with it like a perfect document? How could that be? How could you collect with it? Trei utrei ninu. This is a situation where you have two Eidim contradicting another two Eidim. You basically have a shtar that's verified, and you have two Eidim that verified its signatures. So that's two Eidim. Then you have another two Eidim that come and say what's written in this shtar is false. Because when they signed it, they were psulim, they were forced, and therefore it's false. So it's 2 against 2. So what's the halacha whenever you have trei? A shtar can't be used. It's not kosher to collect with it. It's in such a case. It's a suffix if the shtar is kosher or not.
Why is it 2 against 2? Why isn't 2 just qualifying what the other two said?
Not qualifying. A shtar that says that Reuven borrowed $1,000 from Shimon and it has signatures on it, and the signatures were verified. The information of the shtar is now a testimony of Eidim. That's what the essence of a shtar is. It's Eidus. So the shtar is telling us that he borrowed $1,000. Another two Eidim come and say, no, these signatures, they signed it and they were forced and the story never happened. And so they're saying that what's written in the shtar is false. That's trei. 2 against 2. A shtar is Eidus. You have to always remember, what's a shtar? A shtar is Eidus, what's written in the shtar. Gemara before said, it's as if the Eidim themselves are standing in front of us and are saying this, and we interrogated the Eidus, so now it's 2 against 2.
Yeah, but the Braisa says the same. Braisa says that the second Eidim say the same thing as the first Eidim. No, for us.
No. That's not an add-on. The second Eidim is saying the story that happened in the shtar never occurred because these Eidim were puzzled and they were forced to sign it. So therefore it's puzzle. That's called trei. Amar Rav Sheishes. So Rav Sheishes answers as follows. Zoi Seimeres. What this Braisa can prove to us is the following Chiddush. Hakchoshe tchilas hazamehi. That there's 2 ways whenever you have witnesses and these witnesses are going to be contradicted, there are two ways that this could happen. One is called hakosha, when they're contradicted, and another is called hazama. What is hazama? Hazama, and what's the difference between really hakosha and hazama? Hakosha is, let's say it says in the shtar that Reuven borrowed $1,000 from Shimon, and another group of Edom come and say, no, it never happened. Reuven did not borrow $1,000 from Shimon. That's called hakosha. What is hazama? Hazama is different. Hazama is imanu ayisim b'makom ploni. When the second group of Edom are not contradicting the story itself that happened, rather what they're saying is, these Edom that are saying that they were present when it happened, they were not present. The Edom was somewhere else. They were together with us in a different place. So what does the Torah say? By hazama, we trust the second group of Eidos. That's what the Torah is mechadish, that we trust the second group. And then the first group, vasisim lo kashazama. Whatever the first group wanted to obligate somebody to pay, they're going to now have to pay themselves. That's the chiddush of hazama. So hakosha and hazama are very different. Hakosha, it's a contradiction. And what happens in the case of a contradiction? It's a stalemate. By hazama, we do trust the second group. So now, what Rav Sheshes is being mechadish is, although hakosha is not the same as hazama, but nevertheless, hakoshet chilas hazamahi. Every hakosha, when there's a second group that comes along, this is the beginning of a hazama. Although we can't compare it to hazama, but it's somewhat of a hazama, because the second group is weakening the first edus. In the case of hazama, the second group completely eliminates the words of the first edus. By hakosha, somewhat they begin the process of hazama. So therefore, we compare it to the halacha of hazama. Now, what's the significance of the fact that we compare it to the halacha of hazama? So the Gemara explains. Just as the halacha by hazama is, the second group of Edom that want to push off the first group through hazama, it could only be done in their presence. And Rashi brings that the halacha b'chlal is, anytime you want to obligate a person to pay money, it has to be b'fanov. It's brought over there regarding obligating a person by when his mom is mazik, v'huad bevalov, that you want to obligate a person to pay, you have to say testimony in front of him. It's the same thing also by Edom Zaymimin. If you want to be mevatel the first edus, not only be mevatel, but you want to obligate the first edus that becomes Edom Zaymimin to pay, it has to be in front of them. So just like that's true regarding Edom Zaymimin, kach emakchishin es ha'edem ela b'fneim. So too the halacha of hakosha, when you contradict the first Edom. So over here, the Gemara was arguing that it's treyu trey, that the second group is a contradiction, and therefore it becomes a stalemate. Says the Gemara, that's only if it was b'fneiim. That's only if it was in the presence of the first Edom. But over here, though, what happened to the first Edom? They're not here. They're dead. So therefore, this is not called hakosha. So the second group of Edom can't contradict the first Edom, so we could still use the shtat and collect with it. That's Rav Sheshes' chiddush. Again, the point Rav Sheshes is saying is, there's no hakosha if it's not b'fneim, if it's not in the presence of the first Edom.
Technical thing.
Yeah, it's not.
Always?
This is Rav Sheshes' chiddush, yes. Amalei Rav Nachman, but Rav Nachman disagrees with this whole entire concept. Rav Nachman says, no, we can't compare hakosha to hazama. Rav Nachman gives the svara as follows. If the first group of Edom were here and were present, and the second group contradicts them, so then that's a contradiction. That creates a stalemate. And now we can't anymore pay attention to the first group of Edus, because their words were contradicted. The Havel Edus Mukcheshes, it's contradicted. So now, and now that they're not in front of us, so now in fact, if they were present, so they may have actually admitted to what the second group of Edus said. Meheni. So are you gonna say that we're gonna trust the first group of Edus? How could that be? So what Rav Nachman is saying is, Adarabah, the svara goes to the contrary. If the first group of Edom are present, so then it's very possible that they would have admitted to the second group of Edus. Right? So over here, when you're telling us that if the first group of Edus is not here, and now the second group of Edus comes to contradict them, so over here, in such a case, the first group of Edus should be believed. Since they're not present, for all you know, the first group of Edus would have actually admitted to what the second group of Edus is saying.
They passed away.
So over here, the case is they passed away, but Rav Nachman is pointing out, how could you say that if they're not present, that if it's not done in the presence of the first group of Edus, that this contradiction is not accepted, and we just accept the words of the first group of Edom as valid 100%. How could it be valid 100%? Adarabah, if they're not here, it's very possible that the words of the second group of Edom are 100% valid, and the first group would have actually agreed to the second group. So the svara goes punkt fakert. A hakasha that's not in their presence is a better hakasha. There's more of a suspicion that the first group of Eidos is lying. Okay, now the interesting thing is, regarding Hazama, it doesn't work that way. Hazama must be b'fneim, and as Rashi brought the pasuk that we learn it out from. So even though Rav Nachman is bringing a svara, but we don't apply that svara by Hazama. By Hazama, there is no Hazama unless it's b'fneim. So the Rishonim say, in essence, what Rav Nachman is saying is, don't compare Hakasha to Hazama. Hakasha and Hazama are two different things. By Hazama, the Torah says it has to be b'fneim. And the reason is because by Hazama, the first group of Eidos are going to be obligated to pay. They're going to get punished. You don't punish a person unless it's in front of him. By Hakasha, we're not being minish the first group of Eidim, and we're not obligating them to pay a penny. So over here, there's no comparison between Hakasha to Hazama. And therefore, by Hakasha, we could use a different svara. By Hakasha, we could say that if it's not b'fneim, there's actually more of a svara that we should trust the second group, because over here, it's very possible that the first group would have actually agreed to what the second group says. That's the svara of Rav Nachman. So therefore, we're left with our question. How could the Braisa say here, when you have a tray, so it said, Ein edel in amonim, which it sounded like that the Braisa is saying that we could still use the shtar and we could still collect with it. Elam Rav Nachman, so therefore Rav Nachman explains the Braisa differently. What the Braisa really meant to say is, Oike trei lahadi trei. What we do is, you're right, it's taka trei, it's 2 against 2 here. And therefore we put 2 against 2, and what do we do in such a kind of situation? V'oikim emayne b'cheskes marei. And therefore, anytime you have a suffix like this, the money, in whoever's pocket it is, wherever the money is, it remains in the possession of the owner of the money. So therefore, what Rashi says is, what the Gemara is saying is, let's say it's a person that borrowed money, so the loive is the one that has the chazakah, the money is in his pocket. Let's say it's a case of a meicher, so then it's a contradiction whether this document of a sale is a true document or not. The meicher is the muhsik, he's the one that's occupying the property, and so on, whatever the chazakah may be. And then Rashi goes actually a step further. The main point here is, what happens if the malveh, the lender, went and grabbed money? He went and grabbed money, and now the money is in his pocket. So over here as well, we're going to say that after he grabbed the money, then now he's going to keep the money. Therefore, Rashi says what the pshat in the Braisa is. When the Braisa said Ein Elun Amanim, that the second group of Eidos is not believed to contradict this valid shtar, it didn't mean to say that it's a perfectly valid shtar and you could collect with it. Like the Gemara asked before, could you collect with the shtar? What the Gemara meant, what the Braisa rather meant to say is that we're not going to tear the shtar. We're not going to use it. We can't collect with it, but we're not going to tear it either because we're not sure if it's a good shtar. So what's the significance of the fact that we don't tear the shtar? That we leave the money wherever it is, and so much so that if the malveh or the lekeach come along and grab the money, it's going to stay in his hands as well. Even though it's a situation of trei, but now that he grabbed and he has the money in his possession, it's going to remain in his possession. Okay, which is a unique chiddush for itself, and this is discussed here in Tosfos. This is basically a situation where a person is grabbing money in a situation of a suffix, and still we allow him to keep the money that he grabbed in a situation of a suffix. And Tosfos points out that there are other situations where there's a suffix, and if you grab it, we don't allow you to keep what you grabbed. You have to give back what you grabbed. But over here, in this situation, when you grab money in this situation of a suffix, we allow you to keep the money you grabbed, and that's why it said that you don't tear the shtar. If the shtar would be torn, we wouldn't allow you to keep what you grabbed. But since the shtar is not torn, so the person could say, look, I have the shtar. And possibly the shtar is right, so therefore I can keep what I grabbed. Tosfos has a discussion when we apply this rule, when we don't, it's a lengthy discussion. But that's the chiddush of the Gemara. Sorry? Well, sort of. He can always grab back. Yeah, Tosfos brings that up as well. Correct. Tosfos brings up the sugya of kol don gvar here as well, in the middle, because basically that's what's going to happen over here. Whoever's going to grab the money is going to keep it. Okay. Now the Gemara brings another place where we find this rule that we keep the money wherever it is. This is compared to the properties of an individual by the name of Barshatya. So what was the story with this Barshatya? Barshatya, apparently he got this name of Barshatya because he was a person that sometimes he had his mind with him, his senses were all with him, and sometimes not. He was he wasn't thinking, or he didn't have seichel. So the Barshatya, Zoven Nichsi, Barshatya sold property. Also Beitrei, 2 Eidim came, Omri, and they said, Keshu Shaita Zoven. When he sold it, he was in a situation of a Shaita. So the whole sale didn't take effect at all. But Vasa Beitrei Omri, another 2 Eidim came and said, no, Keshu Chalim Zoven. He sold it when his mind was fully there. So now basically you have the same situation, trey, 2 against 2 regarding this sale, whether it took effect or not. Ravashi, so Ravashi said about this as well, so we have here a suffix, 2 against 2, and so if Barshatya is still occupying the land, so he has the chazakah, so it remains in his possession. But now the Gemara clarifies this. V'loya maran, this that we say that we leave the property by the seller, which is Barshatya. This is only said only if this Barshatya, not only did he occupy the land, but this is a property that already his father had a chazakah in it. So if the father had a chazakah in it, that's a solid chazakah. So the chazakah of the money stays there. But if this Barshatya, there was no chazakah of the father in this field, rather this Barshatya himself bought it from someone, and that's his chazakah. Based on this that he bought it, so then he has no chazakah at all. Because Gamrina will say, Kishu shaita zavan, he was a shaita when he bought it, or Kishu shaita zavan, and he was also a shaita when he sold it. Meaning, how can you say that we place the chazakah of this property in the possession of Barshatya because he's occupying the field now? So it's based on what? Because he bought it. But he bought it as a shaita as well. That's not a valid chazakah at all. So therefore, in such a case, he doesn't have a chazakah. So what's going to happen with the field is a good question, but he doesn't have a chazakah. We're going to have to, if the other person, I don't know, he doesn't have a chazakah.
Maybe he could say, well, it's the previous sellers.
Maybe, okay. But he doesn't, but in such a case, he doesn't have a chazakah. Mm-hmm. Okay, now the Gemara goes back to the point that it mentioned before, where the Gemara said, Rav Nachman argued, that we can't compare Hakchoshe to Hazama. Again, there's 2 ways a second group of Eidim could contradict the first group, either by contradicting the story that the first group claims happened, or Hazama. Hazama is Imanu Ayisim B'Makom Plaini, saying that the Eidim were with us in a different place. So he said it's not the same. So Amar Rabavo says about this, like we said before, when it comes to the halacha of Hazama, so you could only passel the first Eidim with Hazama if it's in their presence, because you want to obligate them to pay or to get punished, it has to be in their presence. But to contradict the story that the first Eidim said, but you're not going to obligate them to pay anything, so that's even not in their presence. But now here Ravavo adds to this, V'azame shaloi b'fneim. Anytime you have azame and it's not in the presence of the first edus, so nihi da hazama lehavya. Yes, it's true that the hazama will not take effect, and the first group of edim will not be pasuled, and they won't be obligated to pay. The kashazama does not take effect. But akhashem miyahavya. However, it at least is counted as a contradiction. It does create a stalemate. It does create a situation of trey yutrei. It's not going to be worse than that. Now the Gemara goes back to another part of what it said in the Braise. The Braise spoke about a situation where this shtar was already independently verified. And the Braise there brought another way how a shtar could be verified. Let's see. So Amar Ma'at said before in the Braise, Trey, so then whatever, that's suffix. So Amar Ma'at, we learned before in the Braise, Im yesh edim sheksav yadam uzeh. So one way how to verify a shtar without the edim themselves verifying it because they died is either that you have other witnesses that are testifying that this is their handwriting. Or the second way was that you have their signatures that we see in another document, and it has to be in another document that was challenged, and the Bezdin verified it. So then the Braisa said, Eina Mana. If another group of Eidis wants to not come and contradict the shtar, they won't be believed. As the Gemara explained what Eina Mana means. So now, but the main thing the Gemara focuses on is what it just said here, that when you want to compare signatures, you could only compare it to another document that was challenged and verified. Only if the other document is a document that was challenged and then it was verified, then you could compare to those signatures. But if you have another document with their signatures and that document was never verified by the Bezdin, so you can't compare signatures. Just like this signature could be false and for a forgery, the other signature could also be a forgery. Gemara says, what it says in this Braise is a proof to what Rabasi said. Rabasi had said, you cannot verify signatures on a document only if the other shtar was challenged and then Bezdin verified it, so then you can compare the signatures. But otherwise you can't. So now the Gemara brings though another option. So what happens if you don't have another signature in a different document that was once challenged? So how do you verify these signatures? And there's no live Eidim that recognizes signatures. So to what signatures could you compare it to? So the Gemara brings another option here. Amri Nerdai say, Ein mekaymen es hashtar elo mishtei ksubos. If you want to compare it to other documents, and it was not something that was verified by the bezin, so you have to have two. If you have two ksubos that you see the same signatures on, or mishtei sadais, or you see another two documents that are written about the ownership of a field, so then you can compare it to another two signatures. So that's going to work. And the Braisa here adds, or Nardoi that is add, V'hu sha'achlam baleim gimel shanim b'shufi. If you're going to be using another two documents that are testifying about a field, it has to be a situation that you know that the ownership of that field is actually good, because they were there, they lived there for 3 years, and b'shufi means that there was no macha, there was no irur in the field, so you know that it's acceptable document. So then you can compare it to those signatures. Gemara qualifies this with another detail. If you're comparing the signatures of one document that one person has to other documents, those other documents have to be in someone else's possession. Can't be other documents that the same person is presenting. If it's the same person that has one document, and then he presents another two documents that have the same signature, and you want to compare to those signatures, then you can't compare it. So the Gemara explains this. The Gemara explains it with a question. What's the difference? If the same person has other documents that carry the same signatures, so you can't compare to those signatures. Why not? Because the same person, he has these other documents, so he compares the signatures, and he may have forged the signatures. But this is also possible even if those documents are in someone else's hands. Because Dilma Azal, maybe this guy went and he saw those signatures, and also he came and he forged it. So he could see those documents in someone else's possession and then forge it. Says the Gemara, no, it's actually not so easy to do that. So to such a degree, a person can't be precise in forging the signatures. If you have those documents in your own possession, so you have time to work on this and to forge those signatures. But if it's in someone else's possession, to look and to compare and to forge the signatures, that's not so easy. So we do not have any suspicion about this. Okay, so that completes the discussion regarding this Braisa. Now the Gemara starts a new subject. Tana Rabbanon. So we learned in the Braisa. A person can write down anything that he saw. He has a testimony and he doesn't want to forget it. So what does he do? He writes it down on a document, and then and then he's going to come and testify about what he saw even after many years. In other words, the point over here of why this person is writing this down on the shtar, we're not talking about a regular shtar where you make a shtar for a sale or for a loan, but the Eidim themselves go ahead and write down the information on a shtar in order not to forget this Eidus. So they have like documents, we saw this, and so they're allowed. They're in order not to forget, in order to remind themselves. Right? They're afraid they're going to forget, so they're able to remind themselves, and even after many years. But the Gemara here now brings a machlokes when they could do this. But Rav Huna says, but he could only use this document to remind him if he would remember a little bit of the story himself. That's what Rashi explains. Zoichra Matzma means that you're afraid you're going to forget, and you wrote it down, and then you look at the shtar and it reminds you the details of the story. But you had to have remembered what you saw on your own without relying on what you saw. If you're totally relying on this shtar, by looking into the shtar, it reminds you of everything, you can't rely on it. Rabbi Yechanan says, even if you don't remember anything on your own, and you have to look into this document that you wrote to remind you of this whole thing that you witnessed, still you could look and it will remind you, and you can say Eidos based on this. But Rashi adds, what Rabbi Yechanan means to say is that after you look into that document that you wrote, it does remind you. It reminds you of the story that happened. If you look into the document and you don't remember a thing, you have no trace of memory of it, and you're just literally repeating what it says in this document that you wrote, you can't do that. You have to remember on your own. Now this signed on this shtar? No. It's not a shtar b'chlal. It's just they write it down just to remind themselves. Now this whole thing the Gemara is speaking about over here is all based on the halacha of mipiem v'loi mipi ksavam, which is the halacha that a person has to say edus, that he has to remember himself the edus that he says. And he can't write down something that he witnessed and then later on say it mipi ksavam, based on what he saw and that he wrote in the shtar, and then just say over what he saw. He has to remember himself and he has to be saying this. That's the source of what the Gemara is saying here. So the machlokes between Rabbi Yochanan and Rav Huna is, to what extent? To what extent do you have to remember yourself? Rav Huna says, even if the shtar reminds you, even you remember something, and the shtar reminds you the rest of the story. And Rabbi Yochanan says, even if you don't remember anything, and everything that you remember is all based on what you see in the shtar. But now you remember, though. But not,
it recollects the memory.
Yeah, it brings back the memory. Then you could say it. This. Yeah, mipiem v'lo mipik sovam. How do you teach this mipiem v'lo mipik sovam? To what extent? So Amar Rabbe said about this, or in the other gears over here, it's supposed to be Rave, Shmaminon with Rabbi Yochanan. So from Rabbi Yochanan we can understand, Hani Beit Redi Yodi Sadusa. You have two people that they know Eidus. Or Minshi Chad Minayna, but one of them forgot the story. Mitkechad Lachavre. So one aid could remind the other aid, and if after he reminds him, it brings back his memory and he remembers, you can say Eidus. Just like Rabbi Yochanan says that you could look into a shtar that you wrote and it brings back your memory, so you can say Eidus about this. So too, one aid could remind the other and it reminds him and he could say the Eidus. But the question was asked, Atzmai Mai. How about if the Baldin himself, that you're saying Eidus for his benefit, so the Eidus don't remember, and the Baldin himself comes to the Eidus and say, don't you remember that you were here and you saw this and this and this? And could you rely on the Baldin himself reminding the Eidus? Rav Chaviva says, even if the Baldin himself could remind the Eidus, yes, we rely on that. But Rav Ashi Amar, if the Baal Din himself is reminding the aid, that's not right. That's not. So then it's sort of the Baal Din himself is reminding him. It looks like that it's just leading him on. He's like, yeah, he's just reminding him of what happened. But even if he doesn't remember himself, he's going to say it for his benefit. The Hilchase, the halacha is atzmai loy. That if the Baal Din himself is reminding the aid of this testimony, he cannot say this eidus. But the Gemara qualifies this. If the aid is a Talmud Chacham, then afila atzmai, even if the Baal Din himself reminds him, he still could rely on the Seidus. Because a Talmud Chacham knows the halacha, that if I do not remember it myself, I'm not allowed to say the Eidus. So therefore, by a Talmud Chacham will rely on the fact that if he's saying the Eidus, he probably knows it himself. And the Gemara brings an incident that happened. Kihad Ravashi, there was a story with Ravashi. Rav Kahana. There was a certain Eidus that he knew for the benefit of Rav Kahana. Amalei, so but Rav Kahana came to Ravashi and asked him, Mi docher mar hai sadusa, do you remember this that you saw, that you witnessed? Amalei, Ravashi said to him, Loi, I don't remember. So again, he tried to remind him, V'lav hachi v'hachi ave, isn't this and this what happened? Amalei Loi, no, I don't remember. Lo yadaina, that is, I don't remember anything. But l'saifit Ravashi. But in the end, Ravashi did remind himself of the story that happened. And Asad lay, and he said Eidos for Rav Kahana. Chazyet l'Rav Kahana da'ave mechsam. So when Ravashi said Eidos for Rav Kahana's benefit, he saw that Rav Kahana was very hesitant about this. That it doesn't, what's going on over here? It looks like Ravashi was only saying the Eidos because Rav Kahana reminded him the details, but he himself didn't remember. Amalei, so Ravashi said to him, Mi savres halachka samichna, do you think that I'm relying on the details that you told me and I'm just repeating it back? I jogged my memory and I thought about this again and I reminded myself and I said the Eidus. So we see over here at Sorbim Rabbanan, Talmud Chacham like Ravashi, in such a situation, he's still able to say the Eidus on his own. Now the Gemara brings up another Mishnah in Masechta Alis that discusses a completely different subject, but it connects to this Gemara because at the end we'll see over here to what point do we say that a person could remember an old testimony that he saw 10 years ago, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, how long ago do we rely on a person remembering something? That's what the Gemara is bringing this up here. So let's see. Tanan Asam, so we learned there in the Mishnah as follows. Hatluliyais, you have these little mounds of sand or of earth, whatever. So the question over here that's going to be discussing is there a suffix that there's maybe a body that was buried there? So if you have these mounds, hakroivais, if they're close, meaning bein le'ir, they're close to the city, or bein le'derech, or they're close to the road. So then echad chadashais, whether these mounds are new places, vechad yishanis, whether they're old, tmeis. Those are areas that are tamei. There's a concern that maybe somebody buried somebody in this place. In other words, the chiddush over here is not only those that are old, and therefore it's possible someone buried someone there and you forgot about it, but even if it's new, And people should remember about this. But still, if they're kroives to the city or kroives to the derech, this is a place that there's a suspicion that somebody buried someone there. And the Gemara will soon explain why. Well, the Mishnah that is explains, Ezeo kroiva, what's considered to be close to the city, chamishim amma, within 50 amma of the city, or 50 amma of the way. Vezi yishana. Now, when it's said over here that's considered to be old, did I skip something? I think I skipped a line over here before. I skipped a line, so let me go back up, I'm sorry. Harachaykais, that is. If it's far, if it's these mounds that are far away, so then chadashais tahayres. If they're new places, so then they're tahayres because people remember that nobody buried anybody there. Yishanais, but if it's something which is an old mound that's been there for a long time, Tmeis, that's a place which is Tamei, because Rashi explains these little mounds are places that people don't usually walk there, and that's why it's a place that it's possible that someone was buried there. Okay, so now, Ezel Kraiva, what's considered to be close? Chamishim Amma, within 50 Amas. Ezel Yishana, what's a time period that we say that this is an old mound that was there for a long time? Shishim Shana, 60 years. Divrei Rab Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, Kraiva she'ein Kraiva himena. Kraiva means that it's a mound that's the closest to the city. If there's another one that's closer than it, then we're not choshesh that someone buried there. And Yishana she'ein Adam Zaychra. Yishana means that nobody remembers when it was when this mound came into being over there. That's what Yishana means. Okay, that's the Mishnah. Well, now the Gemara will first explain the simple pshat of what this Mishnah means, and then it'll come back to the point regarding Eidus. Let's see. So first, my ir or my derech. When it says over here, you have this mount that's near a city or near a road, what is this talking about? Ilemi ir mamish, that it's literally near a city, and derech mamish, it's near the road. So why are we saying that this mound, we should say that it's going to be Tomei, that will say that someone's buried there? Misfeike, you're going to say because there's a suffix that maybe somebody near the city went and buried someone there, or someone near the road buried someone there. That's what our doubt is. What misfeike, mi mechaskinan tume, just because of such a kind of doubt, are we going to give this area a status of tume? Rish Lakish said about Eretz Yisrael the following thing: Ila matzu v'taro Eretz Yisrael. In every single place in Eretz Yisrael, they always, when there was a suffix about something, they tried to find any excuse, any kind of way that we should not accept the status of tumah in this area. The Yidden in Eretz Yisrael, they always had to remain tar to be able to eat trumas, maestros, to be oile regal. So anytime there was a doubt, they always tried to find any heter that it should not be considered tumah. Otherwise, it would be impossible to live. So over here as well, if you have a situation of a doubt, why are we concluding that this place is Tameh? Rab Zera explains the pshat in this Mishnah as follows. Ir means ir asmucha lebeis hakvaris. We're not talking about stam any city. We're talking about a city that's right near the beis hakvaris. And v'derech means derech beis hakvaris. And the derech also is the road, that road that's right there near the beis hakvaris. Okay, so therefore it's a possibility that someone was buried there in this mound. But the Gemara clarifies this further. Now, if it's a road that's not right near the Beis HaKvaris, we can understand why it's possible that someone was buried there. Why? Because the Zimn in the Misrami Ben Hashmoshes, it could be someone passed away right before Shabbos by Ben Hashmoshes, the Mikru, Kavru, Betel, and they couldn't make it to the actual Beis HaKvaris, so someone was buried in this mound in the road right near the Beis HaKvaris. But if we're talking about a city that's near the Beis HaKvaris, Kulu the Beis HaKvaris asli. I mean, but everybody goes and buries the dead people in the Beis HaKvaris. Why should I think that in this mound that's near the city, that's near Beis HaKvaris, why would anyone be buried there? But Rab Chanina explains, yeah, there is a chashash, and the reason is mitoich shahanoshim koivreis sham niflein. Women, they miscarry or are stillborn, so they bury them over here. They don't go to the Beis HaKvaris, but they bury them here in these mounds. Or people that have the limbs, they have these boils on their bodies, and therefore they lose limbs of their body. So at chamishim ozla. So until the distance of 50 chamishim amma, until the distance of 50 amma, ozla, they go and they bury over there. So again, whether it's a woman with a stillborn or a person that, God forbid, he loses a limb, so he's looking for a private place where he could bury and not to go to the Beis HaKvaris. So they look for a place that's near the city. So if it's within 50 amas of the city, there's a concern that the person buried over there in this area. So again, at chamishim amma ozla ihi luchuda, this woman would go by herself, or this person would go by himself and bury over there. But Tfei, if it's further than 50 amas from the city, so then Dabra Inish Ba'da, she takes along another person with him. She would not bury over here in this mount, but she would take someone else along with him. Or the Beis HaKvaris Azda. And once she's going so far out, she goes to the Beis HaKvaris and she buries in the Beis HaKvaris. So Hilkach, and this is the reason why, Tumah Beretz Yisrael Mechaskinon. Usually we do not accept any status of Tumah anywhere else in Eretz Yisrael. We rely on the fact that people are buried only in the Beis HaKvaris. Besides, in these situations where there's reason to believe, there's a good basis to believe that someone may have been buried over here in this mount. Okay, that's the explanation of this Mishnah. But now the Gemara comes back to connect it to our sugya regarding Eidus, forgetting an old Eidus. So what did it say here? Rab Meir said that an Eidus that's saying about a Yishana, an old story that may have happened a long time ago. How old is this? Shishim Shana, 60 years is considered to be a very old story. So Rav Chizde, Shma Mina, Rab Meir, so based on this number of years, Rab Meir said 60 years, we can learn from here, Hai Sa'adusa, that when a person witnessed something, At shitten shnin mitker. Up to 60 years, you remember. Tfei loy mitker. After 60 years, you don't remember what happened. That's what it said here. That if this mound was here for 60 years, past 60 years, this is something that people don't remember. That's already an old story. So we can say the same thing regarding Eidus. If a person comes to say Eidus about something that happened more than 60 years ago, we don't accept the Eidus. Because we say you probably don't remember. Says the Gemara, no, but v'loihi. This comparison of Rav Chizde is not necessarily true, because Hasam with the Leiram Yaleh over here in this story of the dead body that may have been buried there, it's not something that you had the responsibility that you were there to say Eidus about this. It's something that you knew, and over time you forget. After 60 years, you forget. Aval Hacha over here, when we talk about Eidus, when someone was appointed to be an Eidus for something, there was a loan, there was a sale, and you were appointed to be Eidus, Kivin the Ram Yaleh. Since you were appointed for this, so this is something that you pay attention to and you keep in mind, you could remember it much more than 60 years. So we could accept Eidus even for such an old story more than 60 years.